Welcome to the Transformative Principal podcast. This is your host, Eric McKelkey. Today on the show, our guest is Dr. Tina Curry. Tina, welcome.
Thank you, Eric.
Tina's joining us from Chicago. You work in Chicago Public Schools currently as a lead coach at Fernwood Elementary.
That is correct.
How would you explain, Tina, what a lead coach is? I had to ask you this earlier. What's a lead coach?
So a lead coach would be the same thing as an instructional coach. I am pretty much responsible for working with teachers, mentoring teachers, helping them to provide effective instruction in schools for children.
Yeah, and your award list is long. I was looking over the notes. So you helped contribute to the book Teaching for Racial Equity. You've been named an Excellence in Equity Award winner, all kinds of STEM Academy, Teacher of English Awards. Very impressive background. How long have you been in education, Tina?
Over 2 decades. Over 2 decades as a Chicago Public Schools educator, 10 years at the college level at National Louis University, where I work in the College of Education, working with students who are either returning to school to get their graduate degrees in reading and language, or sometimes career changers who have decided to become teachers.
Yeah. So the big topic today we're going to talk about is equity. So I think a good place to start, Tina, would be tell us about your own equity journey. Where did it start?
Wow. So I would say, thank you for that question, Eric. I would say my equity journey started a long time ago before I even knew that that's what I was doing. Like, I have these beliefs that I believe that all children deserve to be in school spaces where they feel affirmed, where they feel valued. I believe that children should be treated with a sense of justice in school, that school should be a place of healing, that the things that I teach should not only transform students, but transform me. And so when those things weren't happening, I would just resist those things, and I would reject those type of things. For example, if there was a school policy that I didn't think that would serve children well, especially children of color, I wouldn't adhere to that policy. Or if my school purchased curriculum that I did not think that would get my children excited about learning, I wouldn't use it. I would switch it out for something else. And then it wasn't until about maybe 5 years ago I realized, wow, all that time I was doing equity work. I just didn't have a name for it. But in recent years, though, I have been like doing a lot of reading, doing a lot of work with other colleagues who have also started their equity journey. And so now I feel really like empowered to like bring others along on my journey with me. So it's led me to become a lot more disruptive in my teaching. And I was really happy to contribute my work to the book about how I use my disruption and my interruption to empower my young people to do the same thing, and to really, really see them for the brilliant children that they are. My journey has come with a lot of rewards, but it's also come with a lot of challenges, sometimes at a great loss to even my own mental health, because when you're like doing really important work that's not popular, you can be isolated. You can actually lose friendships, and sometimes you can feel like you're on an island by yourself. And most often when you're doing stuff that requires you to have integrity, you do tend to like stand alone. And so a lot of my validation has come from my students who were part of my class, who have told me how I really empowered them through my own example of interruption and disruption, to like take up for themselves when they're being mistreated in school, to speak out against things that did not serve them well, and to even challenge their teachers sometimes about the things that they were reading with them, the things they were putting in front of them, what they were asking them to do with it. So it's been quite a journey, and I'm still on it. I would like to think that I am not transformed yet. I am still transforming.
What are some of the celebrations and some of the positives that have come out of your equity journey that you've seen with students, with staff and colleagues?
Well, I would say one of the biggest successes that has come out of my equity journey is when a group of students at a former high school after taking my public speaking class, I did a unit on activism, actually organized and conducted a school walkout to call out racism at the school. And as a result of that walkout was established a Black Student Union. That walkout also established new policy where children could actually report teachers for racism and not have to worry about being intimidated for it. And also built stronger relationships between Black students and Latino students in the building. And even teachers started to attend the book clubs that I was hosting. We started to have more conversations. There was even like a thing where we all had like accountability partners. And so I would say like those were some really big successes that came out of my own journey, and just making myself vulnerable and making my work visible. You know, like not doing your work on the sidelines where people can't see you. But when I was in high school, I played the number 4. So I was down low. It's like you called out the ball, 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 ball. So you guys got to be a little louder so people can notice you, so they can see you. And so just like really just being out there and putting myself out there and trying to be the example, I was able to bring other people along on the journey. But the most, I think, celebratory one was like students stepping up and being leaders in the school, and being brave enough to demand a better education than the one they were receiving.
Yeah. Do you find that usually the students are more open to recognizing that there's some equity issues than the staff? Is that typical?
It is typical. But when students say it, they'll say, that wasn't right. The teacher did this. That's what they'll say. That wasn't right. So they recognize injustice when it's happening to them. And students pretty much won't say, oh, that was an inequity. They'll just
Hmm.
say, that was so wrong. That wasn't fair. I know she shouldn't have done this, or he shouldn't have said that. But adults, I think for us, we just want to believe that we're doing the right thing all the time, even despite the best intentions, though. Like even I've messed up sometimes. And students have taken my words and used my words to call out my own inequities when I unintentionally create them. But the thing is, a harm is a harm, right? So if I accidentally like hit you with my car, it doesn't matter. It was an accident. I've still caused a harm. And I think for teachers, the reason why we went into education is to make a difference. Like we're all wired to want to make a difference, to live into our life's purpose. So it's really hard to like say to ourselves and own up to it and admit that we've done something that caused harm to a child.
Yeah, and I've noticed that when it's come up with staff, it's almost this hope of, I don't want to acknowledge that we have an issue like that, or if I admit that I harmed a student of color, then I'm admitting to being racist, and really I didn't intend to do it, and I don't come from a place of hate. But they sometimes it's hard to get the ball rolling with staff. Do you find that at all?
Oh, yes, I actually experienced that as an equity coach. It was really hard to get the ball rolling for staff. I'm going to tell you the moment I had a breakthrough is we were on the coaching climate team. We were having a meeting, and teachers were like, Dr. Curry, like you're just always coming at us. And I just feel like, you're making me feel so bad about, you're making me feel like I'm a horrible teacher. And so I shared a story about the first time I realized that my race mattered. I was visiting my mother up here in Chicago. I grew up on a farm in Mississippi Delta, and I was at the then called Sears Tower. Now it's the Willis Tower. And I had gotten a little summer job, and a family had come into the store. It was called Fanfare at the time, and said to my manager, we do not want this little Black girl to help us. Like we really want to like spend money, but we prefer the white associate that's over there, not this little Black girl. And I remember for the first time in my life being ashamed of being a little Black girl. And it wasn't until I started like outright intentionally deliberately doing equity work when I realized like that little Black girl was still a very much a part of me. When I would cry and when I would feel bad, that was like her coming out of me. And I shared that with my white colleagues, and it just changed everything. And so it became like a norm for our meeting. We started every meeting with someone sharing a story about, why do you show up the way you do? Where does your harm come from? Or where does your passion come from? And it just built this amazing community that actually made me like love to be at work again. Like I only like been work when I was around my students. And the fact that I was working with a predominantly white staff, it started to make them start thinking about, wow, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't do my bell ringer or important lessons at the very start of classes. It starts at 7:30. Maybe I should wait until I do the most important content, maybe 20 minutes later. So this student is not always missing out. You know what? Maybe I do need to think about how I line students up for dismissal. Maybe I do need to like think about, am I perpetuating the school to prison pipeline every time I send a child to the dean's office for every little thing that he or she does? And so we started having these conversations, and I think that really started to shift the culture and climate in the building. And no, not everyone got on board as fast as people needed to. And again, I think we all still need to keep working on ourselves. That's why we call it, like, transformational work, because we're still trying to get there.
Yeah, never done. Have you seen those as staff have gotten on board with that? Um, some of the situations you're describing, like lining up, office referrals, a lot of that's unintentional. That it sounds like you're just asking them to reflect on practices. But as that is picked up in the staff that you're working with, do you notice it making a difference across the building and within the school?
Well, so I don't know, Eric, when we say that was unintentional, so here's the thing. I don't necessarily know if it's unintentional. Like, would I do that if I were working with someone with blonde hair and blue eyes? Right? So the fact that I'm looking at Black children doing it to Black children, I think I'm thinking that people are like aware, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't do it if it were someone else. Even if it was a rich Black child, you wouldn't do that to Michael Jordan's son. You just wouldn't do that. So I don't know if it was necessarily unintentional, but I do believe that teachers do not become teachers to harm children, to harm any child.
Mhm.
I do believe genuinely teachers want to do what's right, but I think it goes back to the unchecked bias, the unchecked privilege, the unchecked racism that makes us keep doing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And maybe to clarify, instead of unintentional practices, I was thinking unintentional harm, like they were
Mm.
unintentionally harming students of color. Is
I would
that
agree with that. I
okay?
would agree that was definitely unintentional, the harm part. But here's the thing though, like I think school does have to become a place of healing for children. Because here's the thing, children can't heal if I keep returning to the place that's causing my harm. So if I'm in a classroom where I don't feel affirmed and I act out and I get kicked out, let's say I go and talk to the counselor, which is typical at my school. I go in, at the school where I'm referring to, I'm no longer there now, where I talk to the counselor and I'm okay, but the counselor sends me right back to that classroom where my teacher does not respect my full humanity. I just keep just being traumatized over and over and over again. And that's why I think we really have to change, which is work I wanted to try to start before I left the school, um, to change the way we do social emotional learning, right? Because SEL has to address the structural things that harm children in our schools. And that's where we haven't made it yet. That's where we're faltering and we're failing. It's like we're not addressing SEL in a way that's really making a difference.
Was that part of the work that you were doing as a lead coach, or are you thinking taking that work a step further?
Thank you for that question. So it wasn't a part of the work that I was doing as a lead coach. I think how it came about is when I started just sitting and talking to students. And story after story was about harm. Story after story was about shame. Story after story was about feeling degraded, feeling invisible. Like when you walk into a classroom and a kid has his hoodie pulled up over his head and he's lying his head down, he's opting out of learning. He's not doing that because he can't learn. He's just chosen that you're this class doesn't really see me, doesn't value me. So I'm just gonna put my hoodie over my head and I'm gonna lay my head down until the bell rings. So it wasn't, my intention wasn't to like address that part, but it was kind of hard. Like I didn't know how to do the equity work without also addressing the harm that the inequities cause children and the trauma that they experience in school, and getting teachers to really see that. I think if we can really see what we're doing and acknowledge it and name it, and if we really, really care about children, which I think all teachers do, then we can start to change. And that's what I saw at my former high school. I started to see teachers change. Teachers started volunteering to start programs to work with children. Teachers started like even giving up their lunch periods to work with children who were failing. Teachers started staying after work with pay or without pay to work with our young people. They started volunteering to coach. I just saw relationships just forming before my very eyes, where it went from this toxic relationship between white teachers and Black children to some of our white teachers becoming some of our Black children's favorite teachers. And that made my heart smile. Like that felt good. That was a moment where I said, wow, my life's work matters. I'm really, really making a difference here. And it felt really good.
You and I had talked about the difference between equity and access, and I wonder how much of what you're describing there is just the white teacher recognizing, hey, we're missing a relationship here. I'm going to teach kids in my class and I'm going to, grade kids in my class, but really these are some students that need a relationship with a teacher to try and overcome that harm or feel safer in my class. How much of the equity issue do you think could be solved just by relationships between teachers and students?
I think that's almost all of it. I think that if principals who are really looking for a way forward for transformative change in their schools, need to invest in teaching teachers how to build relationships with children, because it's in relationships where we learn. It's in relationships where I feel like I can thrive. It's in my relationships where I feel motivated. Like everything lives in the relationship. And sometimes we just don't know where to start. I don't know how to build a relationship. I don't have any trust generators under my belt. I don't know how to approach this student. I don't know what to say to get to know the student. But teachers can be trained to do that. So we need our school leaders to like even put that in the part of like the beginning of the school year professional development for teachers, is that spending time working with teachers on how to build relationships with children and children's families.
Yeah, that's the hard part as a teacher that I think principals need to figure out is I've always thought, because I had teachers tell me this early on, hey, I'd love to build more relationships with my students, but where am I supposed to do that? Because in the classroom, a lot of times, you can't have one-on-one personal conversations with students, and that's got to come from, coaching, activities, after school, lunches, hallway. That's why I always love lunch duty. That's your time you can have conversations with kids, whether you're a teacher, a principal, custodian, and it has nothing to do with grades, attendance, discipline, just getting to know kids. But that's a challenge in traditional, school schedules. Is like, where do you do that as a teacher? But you got to find a way to have those one-on-one conversations.
Or another way, Eric, like especially like if school leaders are allowing teachers to have some autonomy in their curriculum, you can find a way to do it with like within your curriculum. You can create assignments and create conditions that allow you to get to know students, create assignments where you ask students about their family history, like get to know them. Like if you ask the average teacher in the school, like name 5 things you know about students outside of academics. Most of us can't name 5 things because we don't know what students prioritize in their families, what they value outside of school. And if we don't, shame on us, because that means that I'm almost trying to say after 3:30, my child's life just ceases to exist because I know nothing
Mm.
about them out of the 3:30 time. But there are so many like trust generators in Zaretta Hammer's book, Culture Responsive Teaching in the Brain. Goldie Muhammad's book, Cultivating Genius. She has some really great ways in there around culturally responsive literacies and like all the things that we can do to get to like really, really know our students. Because if you don't really know me, you can't teach me. It's like that's not optional. Like we need our school leaders for transformational change. Like you really got to take the time to get to know students and the families that you serve in the community.
Yeah, the other relationship piece I was going to ask you about, what about home visits? Have you seen that in any schools you've worked in where the teachers or the staff are going to the home with the families and the students?
Wow, we haven't done home visits in Chicago. Oh my goodness, in years, especially now with all of the things where teachers with you have to walk the thin line between like what's appropriate and what's not, and how close we can get to our children outside of our work hours. But I would say like holding functions, like have a parent day, invite parents to come to the school, have a grandparent day, have a father-daughter dance, like have like things in the school, have a family literacy night, things in the school where you actually invite parents into your school community and sort of just get to know and like let parents come and visit classrooms sometimes. I create conditions for them to volunteer at the school. So it becomes like like a partnership where we're working with parents and not working like against parents.
Yeah, I was a principal in a small alternative school, and so it was easier to do because small student body and um, much lower student to staff ratio. But we had a hard time engaging parents, and all those functions and activities, the common denominator is they're on our turf. And a lot of those families, they just don't want to come into the school based on their past experiences or preconceived notions. And we found a lot of value in going to the parents' home.
Okay.
I was really surprised how much it changed the teacher's perspective. You kind of know a student's background, you kind of know what their family life might be like, but sitting in their living room is like the ultimate empathy of, oh, I kind of get where this kid comes from. So I know those aren't the answer for every school in America, but I've seen those be really, really powerful. We had a great lady who did some training with us, and um, we were nervous. Home visits are probably as scary to the teacher as they are the parent. Like, what? You're coming to my house? But she said, go in there and ask one question. What are your hopes and dreams for your kid? And that was a great way to get the conversation started and see that the parents are really working together with the school to make sure whatever those hopes and dreams and goals are for the kid, we can help.
I
Yeah.
love that question. What are your hopes and oh, I love that question. I love that you bring up empathy because that is the gateway to equity. We can't get there any other way.
Yeah. That's hard in teaching too, because most of the kids we teach are different than we were as students. If you're a math teacher and you're assigning, you know, 50 questions of homework every night, not every kid goes home and loves math and wants to do math and wants to be a math teacher. And it's hard to empathize with people who don't believe what you believe, come from the background you came from. And I think that would be the same whether we're talking race or we're talking socioeconomic status or just the love of your content area that you're passionate about. And that's hard. It's hard to empathize with people who don't think like you do.
Yeah. And I think for teachers, um, the key lies in like reimagining what that will look like. What are all the ways that a child can show me that they know what they know? Maybe it's not doing 50 math problems. Maybe there's something else that this child can do. Maybe it's not writing an essay because intelligence doesn't just live in an essay. What is another way? Like how can I tap into um how this child can best show me what he or she knows, which is that culturally responsive piece that we were talking about.
Here's a question I've been thinking about. I don't know if you have an answer to this, because we'd probably if we did, we'd probably all be doing it. But Tina, if there was a school in America that had solved the racial equity puzzle, what would that school look like? How would you know if your school was equitable in all aspects of educating students?
That school will look like every single kid getting exactly what they need to be who they want to be in this world. That's what that will look like. It will look like every child knowing that they are loved because someone has told them. Every child knowing that they are valued. Every child recognized for their strengths. Every child experiencing joy and being at school. Every child having an adult that they can go to, that they trust, that they can talk to. Every child feeling safe. Yeah, and every child being successful, and not just successful as far as like academics, but what success means for them. And every child having like a plan that's going to work for that child. It's like everyone is on track to get there. No child is being left behind, not a single one. All children. When I say all, Eric, I mean all. Not one child has a need that has gone unmet. That's what that will look like.
It sounds like the kind of school we'd all want to work at and send our kids to.
Yes.
Yeah, just thinking about that, that's pretty powerful just to imagine what that would look like. It'd take a lot of work and a lot of things would have to change, but it'd be the kind of school I'd want to work at for sure, Tina. Um,
But it's possible, Eric.
yeah,
Difficult, but possible, right?
yeah,
Difficult doesn't mean impossible. Difficult just means it's going to be hard, but it's possible.
yeah. That's what makes this job fun. If it's not a challenge, it's not worth it. Well, Tina, let's take that big picture answer and let's swing the other way. What's one thing principals could do this week to be a more transformative leader like you?
The one thing that principals can do this week to be a transformative leader is to actually just make a decision to change. That's where it starts. I'm just going to make a decision. I'm not going to be the same principal I was yesterday. I'm going to make a decision that I'm no longer going to be a box checker. I'm going to be a transformer.
That's great. I like that. Also, Tina, we'll have a link in the show notes. Can you tell the listeners what's the best way for them to reach out to you if they want to connect or ask questions?
Please reach out to me on Twitter at Dr. Tina Curry or my email, tscurry@cps.edu.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Tina. Thanks for coming on the show today and leading the racial equity conversation.
Thank you for having me, Eric.